Welcome to Lessons That Last, where a researcher and a teacher talk about what it means to make a lasting impact on students' lives. They unpack the stories former students shared about their memorable teachers and discuss how we can all make a greater impact on the people in our lives. Here's Julie and Laura.
Hello, and welcome back to the Lessons That Last podcast. I'm Julie Hassan, professor, researcher, resilience trainer, and with me is my unstoppable co-host,
Laura Estes-Swilly, just trying to figure out how to get some resilience training down here in Florida, because I think we all need it right now.
I think we all need it everywhere all the time.
Yeah, probably.
You try to teach what you most need to learn. Like I went to resilience training for me. So I'm still working on that.
Well, and as you teach things, you get better at them, right? So it's going to be really good for you.
One would think. I'm still struggling, which is a good tie-in to our topic today because we're talking about quitting.
Yes.
So I have to ask you, have you ever done something hard that you either wanted to quit or you went ahead and quit?
So yes, almost every hard thing I've ever done, I wanted to quit. I think we talked about it when we were talking about more exercise related, that every time my personal trainer would ask me to do something, I would say I can't. So I think that I must have some negative self-talk somewhere, because I very much will get into something like knee deep and think, oh, I can't do this. Never mind. I quit. And I have to get past that little quit. And then I come back full steam ahead, of course, because I'm not a quitter, but I, for some reason, think I am. Now, some things it's right to quit. Mm-hmm. And I've definitely quit a few things that I needed to unentangle myself. So definitely, I think quitting is a constant, and I've wanted to quit. And I mean, if we're all honest, I went through a period of wanting to quit teaching. Mm-hmm. Not to quit teaching, but to quit this system that we're in. So yeah, I think quitting is really present on a lot of people's minds. What about you?
I want to quit everything every day, at least once. And often like 2:00 in the morning, I wake up and decide that's it. I'm quitting all the things, yes. Everything. And for me, when I get to that place, what I've realized is it's when I've lost touch with sort of the purpose and the why of things. I have a hard time sticking with things unless I have a compelling personal why.
Right.
So if I can get back in touch with the why, and it's a compelling why, and it's still important to me, then I'll figure out how to stick it out. But if there's no compelling why for me, I just can't sustain something hard.
I get that. And I think that's the beginning of the process of, is this something that I really should be doing? Or is this something that I actually need to stop? And my sort of psyche is like poking me and saying it's time.
Yes. And I think the other thing for me is, when I think about something as so far out, and I don't just focus on one day at a time or getting, accomplishing the next piece of it or the next part of it or getting through the next thing. And I just think this is going to stink forever. Right. But if I think, okay, like all I have to do right now is this, or all I have to do tomorrow is this.
Yes.
Then it feels better. But if I think, gosh, I've got 10 more years of this or whatever it is,
oh yeah,
then it's overwhelming, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that there is value in, at times, sort of throwing your hands up and saying, I'm done, or I'm out, and taking a break. Because how many days have all of us walked out of school saying, I'm done, I'm just done with this. And we feel it in the moment. And that's like a little exhaust that we need to let out, some steam. And then we gather ourselves and remember, like you said, the compelling why, and we go back. But we need to be able to say, I'm done, so we can regroup and go back to what we want to do.
So how do we know when quitting is the right decision for us, or when we need to just sustain a little bit and stick it out?
For me, it's a series of I'm done's that I don't quite recover from. So I might be arguing with the sainted Jason Swilly, and I know everyone believes he's perfect, but we might argue. And I, of course, will say I'm done. And I don't ever mean I'm done with him. I mean I'm done with this, and I can walk away. But if I said I'm done and I was done with this moment and that never recovered where I wanted to go back, I would need to look at that. So it's the same with a job or with a project or with a friendship, with anything that is getting harder than it's maybe should be or seems that it should be. Mm-hmm. We know things are going to be hard, and especially you and I, and probably most of the people we know, we tackle hard, we go hard, we stay in it because it's hard. And so you have to listen to yourself to know, is this the one that's too hard and I can't sustain this effort? And I think your conscience will tell you, because if you're getting poked more often than not to look at this, you need to look at it.
That's true. And anything that feels uncomfortable, I think we need to get quiet and spend a little time and look at. For me, most of the time, if it's not just that I'm tired, because when you're tired, you just need to rest.
Absolutely.
But other than that, most of the time it's fear. And fear is a liar, right? And fear will tell you all kinds of stories and try to convince you need to quit. So for me, I have to look at that fear. What is it that I'm afraid of? What is it that I'm worried about? Is it real? Is it just a story I'm telling myself? For things that you and I do, things like a podcast or write a book, oftentimes that fear is what people will think, which is such a dumb reason to not do something.
Yeah.
But it'll be a fear like that. And then you just have to kind of talk to yourself about, is that a real fear? Are you really in any danger? Is it worth it? Do you really care what people who aren't doing this kind of hard stuff say?
True. I think we have to remember, and I think we do, but it's great to be conscious of remembering this. There isn't just quit and don't quit. There's also take a different approach. Maybe I need to quit the way I'm doing it and look at it better way. And so I have to be open to, okay, that's not working. And I don't have to quit, because is it worth doing? Is it something that's important to me? Then I need to find a better way that is going to, add to my life rather than take away from it.
Oh, that's so good. You're so wise. I had a mentor say to me when I was a new professor, thinking, I thought this was going to be easier than K-12, and that was not the case. No. And just struggling with a different kind of urgency and schedule and work. Write down all of the things on the left side of the paper that energize you in this work, and write down all of the things on the right side of the paper that deplete you. We're going to hope the energized side is longer. And then just figure out, how do you do more of that and less of the right side?
Yes.
Which was such good advice. Can you delegate some things? Can you just not do some things? Can you pull yourself out of some things? Can you pay to have someone else do or have a grad student do some of these things? Or just, like you said, do it differently?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we have to also acknowledge that the things that people want to quit are so complex. Like you just said, I love a pros cons list, and that what energizes you and what is depleting you. You knew you were going forward with this career shift, and you knew you had a passion for it, and you knew that you were growing towards something that was an important direction for you throughout your whole life. So here you have this very complex thing that you're doing, and all of these things are nurturing you. These are taking away. So we're going to stick it out, but how can we take these things that are costing me something and maybe convert them? There's a way to convert them. Like you said, delegate, don't do. But when we look at something really complex, we have to look at all the parts because there's so many pieces to every big decision, to every major task, to all of the hard work that people are doing around the world. There are so many pieces to it. So, and that's what makes it hard to walk away. And that's why people get disgruntled maybe and burnt out because they can't walk away because it's too important or because one piece of it is something they care about too much.
That's true. And for me, sometimes when it's a decision about continuing something or not, I'm a kind of woo-woo. And I just need a sign.
Yes.
I just need a little something to let me know that this is the right path or not. And sure enough, if I really am struggling and stuck, there will be some tiny way of seeing that, okay, maybe I just need to go a little longer. And it may just be that I'm looking for a sign, that I see one,
Well, I believe that's true. I love a sign. I love a good sign. I had a friend, Heather Thomas, you probably remember her, who used to say, ask for a sign and God will give you a sign. You'll find a sign. And so I did that a lot and I still do. But I realized these signs were always there. What made me see them was the fact I was focused on it. If you want a sign, the signs are there. If you want to ignore a sign, you just can totally shut down to them. It's very simple. But once you decide, you know what, I want to start seeing the flags. Are they red? Are they green? What's the sign that I should continue? Or is there a sign I shouldn't? The sign will be there because it was always there all along.
Right. And we don't want to be in denial, and we don't want to see things differently than they are. Like we have to be open to sort of listening to our lives, right?
Yes.
And figuring out what is it that's making us want to continue something or not, and what is best for us, and kind of what are the pros, and everything has pros and cons, like you said.
Right.
So some of it is that.
Yeah. So we just have to kind of be quiet and listen to the situation we're in, listen to the internal voice, and listen to the signs that are around us before we make big decisions.
And knowing who we can talk to, who wants what's best for us, but who will also tell us the truth. Like you, for me, are my loving truth teller. Like I know if I ask you, you will give me an honest answer that is in my best interest, and I think we have to be discerning too about who we kind of seek that advice from, who has our best interest at heart, doesn't have a stake in the game necessarily, and is going to tell us the truth.
Yes. And you've always been that for me as well. And I think the stake in the game that we have for each other is that we want each other to be happy. That's it. I don't have a stake in the choices you make other than I want you to have all the things that you desire. I want you to have all the successes you deserve, and I want you to be happy. And it's vice versa. So if you have that person, if you're really lucky, you might have 2 or 3 of those people. And we all have a partner who absolutely wants our best interest, but sometimes they get a little cloudy because, love is crazy. So I think you're right, finding the right person. And a lot of what you talk about goes back to that, even when you started talking about the things that we do and the fear and what if people don't like it, how are we going to be judged? And you clarified there, are these the people we should be listening to? And I love that you keep that as a focus because I think that brings a lot of peace.
Yeah. And I think, isn't it Brene Brown who says, if you're not in the arena also doing the thing, then I'm not interested in your feedback, because most of the time, the people who will judge what you do or criticize what you do in a way that's not helpful are people who are not doing the thing.
Yeah.
We were just watching the end as we record this of the women's NCAA finals. So it was Iowa with Caitlin Clark, who we've all been hearing about for a while now, and South Carolina, who has that amazing coach, John Staley, who's a Philly native. And I think the Philly folks would love her to come and coach the 76ers, in the NBA, which would be an amazing, interesting thing. Mm-hmm. But if you go on social media right now, as this game just ended, there's a whole lot of criticism for both of those women from people who are not even close to accomplishing.
Right. They don't know basketball even.
No, and you're sitting on your couch with your phone, right? Stop it.
Yeah.
They have accomplished amazing things. I think we all have to sort of keep in mind that much of the judgment comes from people whose opinions really don't matter.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's one of the things I love about what we do is that we're talking to teachers and we're talking about teaching. And so there's so many people we want to hear from, that we want to listen to, who we want to bring to the table in the conversation, because they are doing it and they are in it. And that makes, for me, kind of our little community that sometimes feels like you and me, but it's not. It's so much bigger. And we don't know all the names or the faces, but they're doing the same things we are.
Yeah. And speaking of great teachers doing the work, you picked Marvin's story about the amazing Mr. Schafer today. So why did you pick this story?
Well, I felt like we are coming to the end of spring break pretty much for everyone. And it's that last quarter of school where everyone is tired and ready to be done and move on. I don't know so much like a 10th grader is ready to be done, but they don't have their mind on what's ahead. A 12th grader is tired of being in high school and they're done. An 8th grader is done with middle school and they are ready to move on. Same with a 5th grader, and same with some of our peers, same with some teachers who are making different plans for next year, maybe going into a coaching role or a mentoring role. And so we're in that place right now in education where it's hard to stick it out sometimes.
Yeah, it's a transition time for sure. I know on social media, I've been seeing all the posts about teachers waiting for their assignment for next year. What grade am I going to be in, or what subject area, or what is my assignment going to be? And so that's been a bit of talk. And I know that adds some anxiety and maybe it plays a part in the decisions people will make.
Right. Everything is in flux right now for all educators. And then for, a fourth of our students. I was talking to a student the other day about getting a part-time job. And I said, well, what are your plans after school? And she said, you mean today? And I was like, no. I mean, after graduation, after school ends. And she said, oh. And I could see stress on her because she would rather talk about after school today than after school in May.
Yeah, because that's a little scary.
Even if you know what you're doing, even if you know where you're going, it's still scary because it's the unknown. Really hard time for seniors, really high anxiety for 8th graders going into high school, super anxious time, I think, for 5th graders, because middle school has such a bad reputation. I don't care what word you put in front of middle school. All of them are scary places for some reason. Parents are scared when they're sending their kids to middle school. It's a whole new world. Kids they're still like little babies in 5th grade. And you realize that when they hit that new campus. And so there's a lot of anxiety for people who are changing. I think kindergartners get a little nervous too, don't they?
Oh, I'm certain. Leaving either your pre-K or mama, like that's and it's a bigger transition for parents and families who are raising little ones to send them off to school.
Right. So it's just a tough time. And so I really felt like Marvin's journey with his teacher was the place where we all are in one way or another, on some level or another.
Yeah. So with that, will you read Marvin's story about Mr. Schafer?
I will. I am in the Lessons That Last book on page 9. By the time I got to 10th grade, I had lost all interest in school. I wasn't a terrible student, but academics didn't come easy for me. I knew I wasn't going to college, and I just wanted to start the next part of my life. My math teacher, Mr. Schafer, was one teacher who connected with me. He took the time to know me and was always encouraging. I was reluctant to tell him that I planned to drop out. I finally got up the nerve to stay after class one day and tell Mr. Schafer my plans. At first, he just listened. Then he asked if he could give me some advice. He talked to me about the long-term financial benefits of graduating, even if I didn't go to college. He told me it would be much easier to stay and finish now rather than trying to get my diploma when I got older. He advised me to just stay through the end of the semester so that I would have a few more credits. Although I had already made the decision to drop out, I agreed to finish the semester. I didn't want to disappoint Mr. Schafer. He checked in with me every day. He introduced me to the shop teacher and convinced me to stay for one more semester and take an electronics class. That class helped me realize I could have a future as an electrician. Each semester, Mr. Schafer persuaded me to stay longer until I finally reached the end of my senior year. I have a picture of Mr. Schafer and me at my graduation on my wall. I'm grateful to him for never giving up on me.
I need Mr. Schafer in my life to be like, just go a little bit farther.
Just finish one semester.
Right. And then maybe one more.
This looks interesting. Could you do that for a semester? Yeah, okay. Mr. Schafer reminds me of my husband's doctor, who will say, when I see you in 6 months, I'd like for you to have lost 10 pounds. And so Jason will, at 3 weeks before that appointment, he'll lose 10 pounds. And then he'll say, okay, you're doing great. So how about 10 more? In 6 months. And just little by little, there's a difference. And that's what Mr. Schafer is doing, just sort of like pulling him in slowly. And it works.
I love that. Like the power of just one more.
Just one more.
Like if you can do just one more over time, that will take you pretty far. And it did for him. And I love just the kind of unobtrusive, non-preachy, sweet way.
Yes.
Mr. Schafer said, there was no lecture. There was no, fear or shame. It was all just like, hey, if you just stick around a little longer,
right,
you would have these benefits,
Yeah, and Mr. Schafer was smart enough to know that conversation wasn't going to be enough, right? Well, if you finish, you'll have an easier time. Here's how much more high school graduates make than non-graduates. But he also was like, hey, this looks interesting. Did you know we have an electronics class? And then there was a reason to stay. Marvin was like, well, I would like to take that class. And in order to take that class, he had to take the other ones. Right. And it just pulled him in a little further.
So smart.
So smart, Mr. Schafer.
So what do we do when our students clearly need advice? How do we give that advice without overstepping? Do we wait till they ask?
No. Well, no. Yes and no. We can see when a kid is in need of something, and we can, if we haven't already, sometimes they come in on day one and you see, I need to connect with that kid because that kid needs something. May not know what it is, but there's something going on. And so let me make a connection. But you have to have that connection first. Remember, Marvin told Mr. Schafer he was going to drop out.
Right.
Mr. Schafer didn't have to ask him or pry it out of him or any of the needling type of things maybe that might have been happening at home for Marvin. He had developed a trust and a mutual respect. And so then it all goes back, of course, to building a culture of openness where a student will say, here's what I'm thinking. And that's the time not to give a ton of advice, because they have a lot of advice at home, or from friends, parents, or there's a lot of adults in their lives. But I like to just give information, information.
And you talked a few minutes ago about asking questions. And sometimes I think that is the most palatable form of advice for young people, is just asking those good, almost coaching questions. Like you said, what is it you want to do after this?
Right.
Or
have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? A lot of times they say no because they don't know what's out there in the world.
Right.
I had a Marvin in 10th grade who was miserable every day, every class. It was constant. And it took months and months and months for him to trust me. And when he finally made it clear that this wasn't for him and he probably was not coming back, we sat down at my computer and I showed him some technical classes. These are some technical areas of study. Have you ever thought about this? Oh, no, absolutely not. I don't want to do that. Okay. Have you thought about that? Ooh, I could do that. And he saw maybe 5 different paths in front of him. And he then had a reason to come to school and a reason to get his high school diploma, because he knew there was something he wanted to do after, instead of I'm doing this drudge. For him, it was a drudge. And I don't want to be here and I'm not going to stick it out. He had to have a purpose. And so I think that's also what Mr. Schafer did. Here's a purpose. What about electronics? And so he realized I could be an electrician.
And it's so hard as an adult, a teacher, especially a parent, when you think you know what's best for them.
Yes.
And they're bound and determined to make a different choice. And forcing it is never helpful. It's
no.
You know, that will cause a bit of rebellion, or, you know, certainly not end anybody up in a good place. I remember our sweet Connor, who was a really good golfer, just his body type and his focus. And, you know, he had grown up golfing because of my family. And he decided, was it 10th grade? 11th grade, that he wanted to play football.
I remember.
Did not have the body type for football. I mean, he's not a big person. But he just wanted to, that was something he wanted to do. And so instead of forcing the issue, we said, okay, give it a try. He ended up keeping the stats on the sidelines. He's great at that. You know, and hung out with Matt Stwan, who we've talked about on the podcast before, and had a really good time. And then ended up the next year going back to golf and having an amazing couple of seasons in golf. But if we had forced it, I'm not sure he ever would have ended up back. And now he's in tournaments. He still golfs, you know, all the time. It's a passion for sure. But I kind of think had we interceded in that, it may not have been a passion that he held on to, you know?
I agree. And for teachers, all educators, I think something you said is so important, where we feel like we know what's best for our own children. We have to remember that we don't know what's best for these kids necessarily. There are general bests, like we know it's best for them not to drink and drive, and we know it's best for them not to vape or to use drugs, that kind of thing. There's no problem being a little forthright in those areas. But when it comes to their life and what's next for them and the choices they're making and the steps they're taking, we don't always know best. And so it's really easy to talk to them from a non-authoritarian point of view, because it's more like an interview. It's more like just, what are you thinking? Have you thought of this? That's really interesting. And I've gone and researched things kids have told me. I'm interested in this, and that's why I don't need whatever. I don't need college, or I don't need a good GPA or whatever. I'll go and do the research, and then we come back for another talk, because I don't know everything. So if we can come in easy, not being the one who knows everything, I think they hear us every time.
Absolutely. And with non-judgment, as adults in general, whatever our role is in a young person's life, none of us like someone to come at us with judgment.
Right.
So if we can come with pure love and acceptance and push aside some of that judgment, I think we'll get a little farther, especially with kids.
Yeah. And it goes back to the same thing that we were talking about before we heard this story. We need to take advice or criticism from people who are in the arena that we need the advice. I was thinking, I have a lovely young man who is a runner. He runs cross country, he runs track. And okay, he's a runner, and he's a teenager. And so you could probably imagine his physique. Not a big kid, not at all heavy in any way, very healthy. And he said to me last week, I want to lose 30 pounds. That was alarming to me, because he does not have 30 pounds to lose. And I said, wait, you want to lose 30 pounds? Why? And he said, well, for my running. And I said, oh, okay. You think if you're lighter, you'll run faster? And he said, absolutely. I said, okay, I didn't know that you were looking at a future with running. What is your plan regarding running long-term? Oh, it's a hobby. And I said, oh, okay. Well, I think that you should talk to someone and see if you should lose 30 pounds. Maybe not. I don't know. I do know, but I'm not an expert. He's going to trust me. He's like, she can't run. She's got a cane. She has a messed up foot. So I took that information and I went to his track coach and I said, this is what the student is saying, and it doesn't seem super healthy to me. And he said, oh yeah, no, that's not right. And I just handed it to an expert who can actually have that conversation with him.
So knowing what we don't know.
Yes.
And coming from a place of non-judgment.
Always.
And with pure intentions, not because it impacts our lives in any way, but because we genuinely want our people to be happy and to do what's best for them.
And I
think
think
advice.
That is what makes a trusted educator so important in a kid's life.
And in a friend's life.
True.
Oh, and all the feels. So, all friends, thank you for joining us on the Lessons That Last podcast. We hope that it convinced you to hang in there. One more day, one more week, one more quarter.
That's all you have to do is one more quarter for now.
Worry about what you got to do right now, and don't worry too far ahead, friends. You've got this.
Exactly.
If you are following along, it is lesson number
8.
8.
It is lesson number 8, called Focusing on the Future.
All right. So grab your copy of the Lessons That Last book. You can read along with us, and please join us again next week on the Lessons That Last podcast.
Yes, we're so glad you were here with us. Bring a friend next time. Thank you for joining us on the Lessons That Last podcast. Love the teacher stories we share? Grab your copy of the Lessons That Last book, available at your favorite bookseller. If you like our podcast, please leave us a rating and share it with other educators. If you want to connect with us, check the show notes to message us on social media. And for even more resources to keep your teacher battery charged, visit teacherrecharge.com. See you next week for another episode.